Welcome back, everybody, to the NRG Series trial here in Minneapolis. We're going into round 3 of the Pioneer 5K. My name is Otto Rakdos. If you're just joining us, I'm here with Devin O'Donnell, a.k.a. Doomwake. If for any Pioneer fans, you already know. We just came out of an exciting match. We had Abzan Greasewing against Mono Green Devotion, or actually, sorry, it was Golgari Devotion, and the games were really close. They were very exciting, but we're moving on to a different subject here. We've actually got two decks that look very similar, but they're actually just not. Jund Sacrifice on one side, Rakdos Midrange on the other. This is going to be pretty exciting. Devin, how do you feel about this matchup? What is going on with each of these decks?
So Rakdos Midrange is kind of the Jund of the format. A lot of removal, a lot of discard spells, some cheap efficient threats, and that, really just trying to do some Jund stuff, really just trying to set up, removal spell or like discard spell into 2-drop and kind of interact up the curve. And then from Eric's side, we got Jund Sacrifice now. This is a deck that if you played some standard during Throne of Eldraine, you might be pretty familiar with this. After the Oko ban, of course, there is deck revolves around the cat being Cauldron Familiar plus Witch's Oven, and then ways to kind of pay you off for either sacrificing the cat or the food that you get from the oven in Mayhem Devil, or Trail of Crumbs, which also pays you off for sacrificing the food, giving you some more advantage that way. Looks like we're topping the curve with the typical, I guess the more common version of sacrifice is Rakdos, but looks like Eric's choosing to go with Jund, not just for the Trail of Crumbs, but also for Corvold, which is a really, really massive top end threat that draws you a ton of cards. So trying to establish that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Eric Hawkins on a mulligan to 6 now, putting one card back. What cards are we looking for here from the Jund side of things? Just like, is this like one of those like powerful, we just want our proactive strategy to be in play, or in general, are we okay with any sort of just combination of cards that will, just like lands and spells? Because I'm sure on the other side, from the Rakdos side of things, it's kind of funny too, because you mentioned like, the Rakdos deck is the Jund deck of the format, but the Jund deck is not the Jund deck of the format. And now I'm just going through this like identity crisis. And so, looks like we're going to find out what was kept here, as Thoughtseize is going to enter play on turn 1.
Yeah, from Eric's side of things, it's less so about lands plus spells, because Eric's deck is very centered around synergies, right? Like, as we talked about, the Cauldron Layer plus the Witch's Oven, the Trail of Crumbs to go alongside those things. And it's more about trying to establish, it's more of like A plus B, but you have a lot of A's and a lot of B's, if that makes sense. Like, it's not just a 2-card combo. You have stuff that combos with other stuff. But yeah, and obviously from John's side, it's really just, John doesn't really care about what kind of spells. It's just lands and spells. Most of John's spells do the same thing from the Rakdos side of things. Yeah, removal spell for the Goose here. So Eric, multi 6, kept the 1-lander, relying on this Gilded Goose. Kind of a rough spot to be in against Rakdos, and I don't believe that Eric hit a second land drop. He did not.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where as soon as you play that Thoughtseize, you know exactly how the next few turns are going to be playing out here. Bonecrusher Giant going to come into play here from its adventure. And new question. Okay, Dragon Skull Summon off the top. That might mean we actually have a game here to play. What cards is John looking for in the next few turns? What is good? I mean, something like Graveyard Trespasser. Is that what we're happy to see?
John's really looking for the heavy hitting 4-drop. So looking at John's deck list, we have 1 Sheoldred, 1 Kalitas. Typically you see, 3 total 4-drops. So we've slimmed out a little bit on that. But yeah, Graveyard, just something to kind of add a little bit more pressure. Like you said, Graveyard Trespasser. Looks like he does have the Sheoldred.
Okay, yeah, that is sweet. Sheoldred, the Apocalypse is a card that, from a lore perspective, I think is really cool. It's just like, I still think of, Karn walking down to the Dominaria, and he's finding evidence of the Phyrexians and whatnot, and that this is what it means, right? And when I first saw this card, I think I horribly misjudged it. I looked at this card and I was just like, I don't know where this is really going to ever see play. You mentioned it's a little bit overhyped, but I think it's still pretty powerful. Looking at the card here, how does this card? What are the implications of this card in this matchup?
Specifically, Eric is not trying to draw a ton of extra cards. So, I mean, even if for some reason, if Eric can't remove it from the battlefield, you try to, well, I guess he is drawing a couple extra cards here with the Priest, but yeah, even if Eric can't remove it from the battlefield, he probably doesn't care too much about the trigger, because you can, take 2 a turn. You can kind of sort of quote unquote blanket with the Cauldron Familiar, chump block it, get the Cauldron Familiar back, that kind of stuff. So doesn't care too much about it. That like the big bodies that don't have evasion, like flying or trample, don't match up that well against Cauldron Familiar. So
That's funny. Who's gonna win? The literal apocalypse or just one cat? Like that is Pioneer, very funny. Okay. Sheoldred gonna come into the red zone here, dealing 4 damage, and it looks like we have a Mayhem Devil on the other side.
yeah, and there's a Priest of Forgotten card. So if John does not have another removal spell lined up to kill the priest, you could see maybe Eric gets say sacrifice the food to get back the Cauldron Familiar, and then tap the priest to sacrifice the Mayhem Devil and the Cauldron Familiar. Excuse me, to -2 to or not -2, but to use the priest to make John sacrifice a creature. So that is a line that is definitely going to be available to Eric next turn, presuming that there's no Fatal Push or Bonecrusher Giant, and it looks like there's not. So
Okay. Powerful stuff here. It's surprising too, because this is a mulligan to 6. We didn't even have our second land drop, and now suddenly we might just be on the verge of being in control here. I mean, Cauldron Familiar coming back, combining these are the synergies that you're talking about, right? Like you just need a couple of them, and then suddenly you're leaping forward like massive steps and creating these like insurmountable board states. So that is sort of interesting, and that's something that I wish I'd asked you at the beginning. Is if you had to pick a pilot that you would like to see or you would expect to win, this is it, Devin O'Donnell. Time for you to practice your caster curse. Who do you think would have won this game 1 matchup if you only had the information on the matchups?
Typically I do tend to favor the sacrifice side of things. I think it's the Rakdos deck has a lot of the sacrifice deck is really good at grinding, right? Like as we talked about, Trail of Crumbs along with Cauldron Familiar and stuff like that, even Corvold especially. Typically I would say sacrifice is normally slightly ahead of the mid-range deck, but obviously things can happen where Thoughtseize plus removal spell against the mulligan can be pretty backbreaking sometimes. And you saw there was a removal spell on the priest. So very, very well timed by John, waiting until the Cauldron Familiar got activated to then cast the removal spell to basically bait Eric into, sacrificing that. Not that Eric had another choice, but.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's a 1 of Heartless Act, but then again, this deck is full of, just all sorts of Jund value there, including a diverse suite of removal spells here. So we're going to go into game 2 here. John Wagner taking the first game with Rakdos Midrange. Now, we're going to take a look at sideboards. I believe we have deck lists up now that we can take a look at. And let's start with, yes, the Jund Sacrifice side. Is there anything in particular that you are pretty excited about?
Well, I'm gonna have to pull up this card because it's been a while since I've seen it, but there is a card on the bottom. I believe that is the Dictate of Erebos. So let's see if we can get this up here. So that's 5 mana enchantment, has flash. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. I'm not quite sure if we want that in this matchup. I guess that there are a decent number of just random creatures that we can hit from the Rakdos side of things. Maybe that's something we want access to. The cards I definitely want are the Angrath. What's that? Is that Massacre Girl? I don't think I want the Massacre Girl, but what Angrath, Tireless Tracker, Murderous Rider, and Clothis, I think, are the 4 that I'm looking at. With the Dictate of Erebos being a potential, maybe. I'm not sure if we want that though.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Any cards that you'd like to cut?
Looking over the deck list.
It's a little tricky because, like you mentioned, this is a synergy-based deck, right? So if you remove too many synergy-based elements, I feel like you might end up with a deck that doesn't really like mesh together.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe talk yourself into cutting Sheoldred because maybe not the matchup is not quite about that. Just having a 4-mana creature that doesn't get you immediate value, and there are a lot of removal spells for Sheoldred on the Rakdos side of things. So maybe you could cut that, maybe trim like a Liliana or 2.
Okay, let's take a look at the Rakdos midrange side of things. I want to know what sort of options we have here, and it looks like we've got a variety of cards. Anything here? My favorite card, I think, in maybe one of my favorite, not in all of Pioneer, but one of my favorite cards, the Reckoner Bankbuster. That one makes me happy.
Yeah, that one's mostly for the Rakdos mirror matches where you just need a little bit more card advantage. Yeah, I don't know if we want necessarily that type of stuff in this matchup. I'm definitely looking at Hidetsugu Consumes All. That's a massive one to be able to not only clean up a lot of the Gilded Geese and Witches' Ovens, but also exiling the graveyard could potentially hit a Cauldron Familiar or something along those lines. In that same wavelength, maybe you could talk yourself into Go Blank for the Cauldron Familiars if you can maybe set that up. Meathook Massacre is another one that's very, very good, and even less so for the enters the battlefield ability, but more so for the other ability where whenever their creature dies, they lose a life and vice versa. So because there's going to be a lot of creatures leaving the battlefield and things like that, it kind of helps mitigate the Cauldron Familiar a little bit.
Okay, yeah. How about something like Unlicensed Hearse? Is that like too narrow, too specific? Because at the end of the day, the way I see it is that the Jund Sacrifice deck does have a lot of synergies. Does have a big graveyard, portion to it. But at the end of the day, like you could still just like it's not like you mentioned. It's not like delicate as some of the synergy decks that we've seen before.
It's weird because specifically with a card like Unlicensed Hearse, I guess you could kind of say the same thing about Go Blank, but with Graveyard Hate in general against Cauldron Familiar, if there is an extra food lying around, like it's really not, you're never going to really be in a spot where you have to time it incredibly well, right? So for example, if there's a food and then you sacrifice a Cauldron Familiar to your oven, if they respond to making a food, well, you already have an extra food lying around to get back the Cauldron Familiar. So it just kind of, it's really hard to line up that specifically, especially against the version with Trailing Goose, because they're just making more food.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that is super interesting, and that's something I had really thought about. So we're going into game 2 here. Eric Hawkins going to be on the play. Blood Crypt pass the turn. Jund Sacrifice versus Rakdos Midrange. If you're joining us just now, hi, hello. My name is Rakdos. I'm here with Devin O'Donnell. Consider following the channel here. So show your support to the staff. Show your support. Norm has been going around. The NRG series is a lot. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and we want to say thank you to the people that are putting on all of this great coverage, all these great opportunities to play Magic at the highest level possible. Because remember, winning this event qualifies you for Atlanta. Winning Atlanta gets you in the Pro Tour and the Worlds, and that is a lot, right? This is the first step. So thank you to the NRG staff for providing these opportunities for us. All you got to do, hit the follow button. It's free.
Is this where we do the follow who bid that you did with Joe?
Still can't believe he didn't know. That's a knock joke, right? Like everybody knows that, right?
So a bit of a slow-paced game here. Nothing for either player for the first 2 turns. We saw basically a glorified Mind Rot on turn 3 for John Wagner, and Eric got a pretty good follow-up here. Tireless Tracker into Fabled Passage, which is going to generate 2 permanents, so that even if the tracker leaves the battlefield, which it is going to, unsurprisingly, there's a lot left over. A couple of cards left over for Eric. So pretty good sequence for Eric there.
Yeah. I think. Again, here's what I actually suspect is that there's going to be a lot of like Jund elements. Okay, this is going to sound really dumb because like the Rakdos deck, you called it basically the Jund deck of the format. The Jund deck is quite literally a Jund deck. So when I say that there will be a lot of like Jund elements to this matchup, I know it sounds silly, but like you understand what I'm trying to say is that there's going to be a lot of back and forth in value proposition and things like that. Like we are trying to get as much extract as much value from each card as possible, because this match might just go very, very, very long, and every single extra card will matter.
Right. And you see, Eric did keep in the Sheoldred, so I think it's possible that maybe post-board, Eric's trying to position himself more towards that mid-range side of things, and maybe maybe I was a little bit wrong there, and he actually trimmed on some of the more combo elements, expecting the Graveyard Hate to come in. So that's interesting to see the Sheoldred still in the deck, but it does make a little bit more sense here the more I think about it.
What was your reaction when you first saw Liliana being printed into Pioneer?
Oh boy, it was a delight. I knew that card was going to make a massive impact. It's probably even been more impactful than I initially thought it was going to be. It's probably it's one of the more impactful card printings into Pioneer in quite some time. But it's just like a massive boon to all of these mid-range decks. And then there's obviously some other decks that utilize the graveyard as like a small engine that just kind of play it to kind of shore up their mid-range plan B, as it were. Like this deck, for example, it's like this is a sacrifice deck, but it also just has a decent mid-range plan, and then Liliana's really good in those mid-range types of games.
Yeah, this is now I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the that Spider-Man PNG where they're just like both Spider-Mans pointing at each other. Sheoldred's on both sides of the table here. Also makes me remember the old Legend rule, which is like you can't play a Legend if there's another one on the exact copy on the other side of the table. And then how the Legend rule has like changed over time to me is kind of a funny thing too. But Sheoldred is in play on the other side from the Rakdos Midrange side now. Fable at Chapter 2. And looks like maybe now we are dialing up some of the heat.
Yeah, we got a Mayhem Devil, but we don't have a clean answer to this Sheoldred. I couldn't quite get a good glimpse of what Eric's leftovers are. I believe I saw a Dreadbore in John's hand. John basically, it seems like, see, this is kind of why I was a little bit skeptical of trying to be a mid range deck, because I feel like the Rakdos deck is just going to be better at being the mid range deck at almost every stage of the game, and I think your edge as far as Sacrifice versus Rakdos is concerned is the fact that you have all these underlying synergies,
Yeah.
right? And it's those synergies don't necessarily get broken up by a lot of spot removal that the Rakdos deck has. But when you're transforming your deck into more of a mid-range deck, you're almost like playing their game, but it feels like you're just playing their game worse than they are.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Because imagine, there's going to be a lot of overlap between the two decks. Like, you both have X amount of removal spells, you both have Sheoldred, you both have this. But then what happens when your opponent draws like a Bonecrusher Giant, or maybe like that's a good example. They draw a Bonecrusher Giant, and then you draw like a Witch's Oven, and suddenly you are very behind on the mid range game because they have that extra relevant resource. So I really agree with that analysis, and I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think we have an Angrath to dial up, but Angrath can only go so far. There's, I think, too many permanents for that card. Now, I don't know if I can bring up Angrath. I'm pretty sure the minus is where you get to steal something. Let me pull it up real quick.
Yeah, Angrath the Flame Chain. -3 is active treason. It gains haste until end of turn, and then you sacrifice it only if it's CMC 3 or less.
None of that mattered. We are done. It was not
Well,
enough.
yeah. No, it's kind of interesting because you sort of alluded to Rakdos Midrange being one of the best decks in the format alongside Abzan Grease, getting a major upgrade in the form of Liliana of the Veil here. And you sort of see here in this game where just, it was basically like a Jund v Jund matchup, except one Jund was an actual Jund deck and the other one was like a synergy Jund deck, which means that maybe there was only one Jund deck, but it's not the Jund deck. Oh god, my head is starting to hurt. There's just a lot of stuff going on here, but yeah, it looks like John Wagner going to take the game here. Rakdos Midrange winning 2-0 over Jund Sacrifice. And yeah, I'm glad to see that we could sort of see the impact of Sheoldred, because at some point I was thinking that it was I was thinking that it was going to be a very like profound, very, very impactful card. And then, like, judging how this match in particular played out, I am now of the impression that you are correct, that there might be only certain matchups where it's truly relevant. Uh, yeah, what are you thinking about either that or just any of the other thoughts from the match?
Specifically from the Rakdos side of things, before the printing of Sheoldred, they usually had a couple of copies of Kalitas main deck, and Kalitas kind of has the same problem where it is pretty matchup specific, but I think Kalitas, when it's good, is a little bit better than when Sheoldred is good. Like, if you can imagine a board where your deck is all removal, you untap with Sheoldred, you kill two things and make two zombies. Like, it's nearly impossible to come back from that. Best
Right.
case scenario with Sheoldred is they lose 2 life and kill it, which is like, that's fine. And I think the body on Sheoldred is it's obviously quite a bit better. But I just think the games where Kalitas is an all-star, it's just so much more backbreaking than when Sheoldred is good, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. Okay, but Liliana, you would agree, is just like insane for the deck.
Yes, Liliana is crazy. Liliana is just a massive printing. The kind of dynamic between the Rakdos versus Heroic matchup is something that has been discussed kind of ad nauseum, and Liliana kind of turns that matchup from close to, I don't know how they ever beat this card.
Okay. Well, it looks like we have John Wagner in the booth here for a post-round interview. I am very curious to see what the thoughts are here. Just in general, like when you do new set is out and it's not completely solved, and I do want to sort of figure out where his headspace is for not only this deck but this event and things like that. So once we get into that, we'll fire away. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I'm kind of curious now. Like you said, Rakdos Midrange was you know one of the 3 decks to look out for. Is if you had to play in this event. Okay, it looks like we're ready. So I'm gonna put a pin on this question. We're gonna come back to a little bit later because I haven't asked you yet, Evan, what you would be playing. So we'll come to that in a little bit. But first, John Wagner on Rakdos Midrange just won. John, congratulations on the win. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Here playing Pioneer after a long day of playing Modern yesterday. So.
Oh, okay. Nice. Well, round 3, you are 3-0 now. That is a very good start. Very impressed. Honestly, the matches they felt close. So the games they felt close until they weren't particularly close at all. Have you been playing Rakdos Midrange for a while now?
Yes. So I own every Pioneer deck, so I play.
Oh,
Try to get a bit of everything. For my team, I test a lot of the red black mid range variants that are out there, as well as some other stuff. But yes, I've been playing Rakdos probably since Kamigawa came out.
gotcha. How do you feel about Dominaria United in the face of Rakdos? I was talking to Devin over here. Devin was really hyping up a certain card. I thought Sheoldred was going to be that card, but it really wasn't.
Sheoldred's impressive. It's definitely better than Kalitas generally.
Okay.
Where Kalitas is very good against the green decks as well as like small creature decks. Uh, Sheoldred is also good against those decks, but also good against pretty much anything else that draws cards. So very impressive. The 4-mana 4/5 body has been very good. Um, I wasn't sold on playing two today, so I went with a 1-1 split between Sheoldred and Kalitas, but Liliana of the Veil has been
Okay.
a
Yeah,
standout.
that's the card that I was kind of expecting and pretty happy to see. Yeah, I mean, talk to us about the match that you just played. How was that?
Sure. So playing against Jund Food, classic deck for as far as Pioneer esque formats go. So it's not a bad matchup. It's about as even as a mirror match. If they can land something like a Trail of Crumbs, that can leave you quite bad in the long game. Which is why in game one I chose to Thoughtseize that and not say like Corvold or even some of the other threats in the hand, because I know that if I have to play a long game, which I likely will, Trail of Crumbs is going to be what buries me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the one card that you really can't answer from the Rakdos side of things, right? The Rakdos is not generally good at answering enchantments, so that does make a lot of sense.
That's correct. If it actually drew cards, I would consider letting them keep it, because then it's a liability with
That's right,
Sheoldred
yeah.
on the battle. But since it's bypassing Sheoldred, it's especially heinous for the Rakdos deck.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, you're 3-0 right now. Any matchups you are looking to play against to secure the top 8 for today?
Well, I'm playing the Rock, so I came here to have 45, 55 matchups. So I'm willing to play against anything. I enjoy playing the mirror matches the most. So I'm looking forward to playing a lot of that, as well as with Liliana. I actually look forward to playing against Green Devotion decks.
Gotcha. Any advice you give to fellow Rakdos players on how to win, like the mirror, for example?
Side out your thought seizes, and just remember that the card's not very good in mid-range mirror matches. But uh, keep your Fable of the Mirror Breakers in your opening hand.
Yeah, that card has definitely been one of the best cards I've seen in recent. Anyways, so congratulations, John. 3-0. Very, 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 very strong start. Hoping to see you in the top 8. Hoping to see if you can get that first place finish, qualify for DreamHack Atlanta, get the NRG points. Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive, and I think it's kind of interesting, Devin, because his take on Sheoldred was a little bit different from yours, and so I think that to me is a little bit impressive just on like the kind of variety that you can have going in from just like play style, because I do think it's look like the two schools of thoughts. You could have like quote unquote the objectively correct play that gives you the highest percentage point of winning or the highest whatever of winning, but then I also do think that just like how you play your games of Magic, it does matter, right? And so
Right.
seeing the differing viewpoints to me is certainly something very fascinating. As someone who is also learning a lot about Pioneer, this is like something that I would definitely write down a note that I would make myself. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like I said, both cards have their merits. I think it really depends on what you expect to face. I think the biggest thing about Sheoldred is obviously the body, right? The being a 4/5, being able to blank stuff like Old Growth Troll, and having Death Touch is pretty important. Being able to trade with some larger creatures, so that is definitely a factor, and also just being very, very good against the Izzet decks that like to draw a lot of cards. So it definitely has its pluses and minuses. So.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, well, I'm gonna chime in, see if we have a backup match. Yeah, okay, looks like we do, and I'm pretty excited about that. The backup match that we're going to be looking at is Bant Humans against Mono Green Devotion. Mono Green Devotion at the hands of Andrew Ellenbogen Bant Humans by Matt Sickink Johnson. Hope I got that right. But Matt, yeah, let's go ahead and dive right into that and see how that goes. Andrew Ellenbogen, no stranger to the NRG series, already queued for the end of year championship. I believe won one of the showdown events, but we'll get that graphic up later, so we'll definitely be able to see. And it looks like 101 versus 2-0 going into round 3, game 1.
101.
Yeah.
Yeah, 101 likely means a mono green mirror round 1, because those games tend to the combo turn tends to take pretty long. And the thing about the mono green mirrors, there's a lot of spots where you want a card for Damping Sphere to make it so they can't do anything broken next turn, but then you are sitting here where a Damping Sphere where neither of you can really do anything. So it's just like this weird board stall that just takes forever to to figure itself out. It's kind of a mess sometimes.
Gotcha. So we've already seen the mono green devotion. Now, Bant Humans is a new deck that I'm kind of interested in. 2 questions. First of all, what is the deck trying to do? Second question, how does Dominaria United impact it? Third question, what's important in this matchup? That's a lot. I'm sorry. I know I can push you. I'm not used to this because, like, Joe, I know he'll be like, well, first of all, slow down. Second of all, no, but I know, yeah, you got this. What's up?
So, well, I'm looking over at the deck list. The card that I was expecting to see here is Aether Channeler, which is, I believe on the last broadcast we had talked about a couple of times as potentially a replacement for Reflector Mage. But we notice here Matt is choosing to not go with the Aether Channeler and is going with the tried and true 4 copies of Reflector Mage. So, a little surprised to see that, but I understand the, where you want Reflector Mage. So, obviously, because the upside is they can't recast their spell, which can be pretty massive against stuff like Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns. This matchup in particular, I think it's pretty close. I think I would say, traditionally speaking, the mono white variants of humans are maybe a little bit more favored against mono green, mostly because they have just a lot more early pressure. They're like way more focused on the 1 and 2 slot, and Matt's deck is focused on the 2 and 3 slot, where you see Charming Prince, Thalia, Werewolf Pack Leader, and then 3s being Adeline, Extraction Specialist, Reflector Mage. So it can't really apply nearly as much pressure, and that's where typically the mono white deck gets an edge. Also, No Brave the Elements is pretty massive. So.
All right. Well, looks like Hopeful Initiate in play, and also Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. On the other side, though, we did see the turn 1 Elvish Mystic followed by back-to-back Wolf, the Havens on the other side, Wolf Willow Haven. And now, looks like the mana is quite set up here. Thalia being very powerful, certainly much more impactful on the play. So from this position, I mean, I kind of feel like Andrew Ellenbogen is playing for a really large turn here, but seems like it might just be an Oath of Nissa finding a lot of mana.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 elves and a land. Yeah, I think it was 2 elves and a land. I don't know if Andrew has a payoff left over, but yeah, Thalia not doing too much here, as Andrew kind of already has his mana pretty well established with 2 elves, 2 havens. So just really looking for that payoff, and like you said, the Thalia's not really hampering him that much. So, well,
Right.
never mind. There is a payoff. I have been corrected.
Yeah, I mean, this deck, like we saw earlier in round 2, mono green devotion just is one doozy of a deck. I mean, a lot of the permanents there are so terrifying, whether it is Storm the Festivals, whether it is Karn the Great Creator. Now, we talked about Karn the Great Creator being great against the Greasefang matchup. How does it line up here? What are some of the targets? We see Skyship coming into play, or to the hand rather, but how do you feel about it otherwise?
That is certainly the most common target. Just wanting to get the boat to be able to answer some of Matt's stuff. Now, I will point out a couple things here. There is a Hopeful Initiate that has 4 toughness. So because the Hopeful Initiate can not die to the Sky Sovereign trigger because it has 4 toughness, we can't target. Well, we can't kill that with the boat trigger. And Hopeful Initiate, I don't know if you want to pull it up on screen, has an ability where you can pay 3 and remove 2 +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control to essentially destroy target artifact or enchantment. So if Matt finds a land, which he did because he didn't have a land last turn, he's going to be able to kill that Sky Sovereign now, which is really, really massive.
I was about to do my best Titanic impression, and I realized I probably shouldn't. Not yet. I don't think I have trained at all for this, or would want to do that to our 600 viewers. Who, by the way, if you haven't already, hit that follow button, show some support. And if you really want more paper coverage of this, consider subscribing as well. You get a lot of perks here, a couple sweet emotes, but most importantly, you get to support your favorite coverage channel here at NRG Series, which is awesome. And it looks like, as you mentioned, yep, the Hopeful Initiate is actually just doing its job here. I would say more than an Initiate now is what's like the next step after Initiate? Like probably like I don't know, like
Disciple.
yeah, sure, Disciple or just like I don't know, like Mentor or something like that. Whatever. It's definitely done its job, and the boat has been taken care of. But another backup copy of Karn coming into play now, and the game continues.
Well, the good news for Matt is, I would say almost 100% of Mono Green Devotion decks don't have a second Sky Sovereign in the sideboard, and Karn obviously can't fetch from the graveyard, so that is a plus side for Matt. The basically free himself of having to deal with that Sky Sovereign. And I'm trying to think, like a lot of stuff that Andrew could get. I guess we don't really have any counters on the Hopeful Initiate. It's going to take a little bit before we get that going again. But the one thing I will note about Hopeful Initiate, it can remove counters from anywhere. So, say, for example, if you put a couple counters in the Lieutenant, now it's not going to matter because the Initiate's dying, but you could have, if there was 2 counters in the Lieutenant, you could use the Initiate to remove counters from other creatures.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, I'm very excited because Karn Takedown pulled out a Meteor Golem and was just like, yeah, you mess with the boat, you get sent to the graveyard. I don't know. This to me, Meteor Golem is just like one of the funniest cards. As we see another Lieutenant coming into play, also an Experiment 1. Okay, sounds good. Meteor Golem going to block to protect the Karn.
Good sequence for Matt there. Just basically making a creature that is a 4/4 to essentially force the chump block because Andrew really wants to protect the Karn there. So good sequencing to, just make a 4/4 attacker to be able to pressure the Karn. And we'll see what Andrew has. Now, Andrew, if I want to just pull up Andrew's sideboard real quick to see what we're working with here.
And in the meantime,
go ahead.
I want to ask you, was there any consideration to like double blocking the 4/4 with the Elvish Mystic? Or is that too crazy? Devotion too important? We don't really have very many green pips in play.
Was there an elf untapped? I thought they were both tapped.
Oh, maybe they were both tapped. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
if there was an elf
untapped.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there was an elf untapped, I think double blocking is pretty reasonable, but I thought they were both tapped.
Fair enough, yeah.
So we're going to go for Cauldron.
Going to very, very much so commend the players for their pace of pay. You just love to see it. The joke is that this is sped up. Yeah. The joke is this. Please laugh, Twitch chat. Laugh. No. Nervous sweat down my side of my face here. All right, cool. So we see
the joke, if that makes you feel any better.
I appreciate you. What is it called? Humoring the teacher. You know what I mean? Oh man. All right. So the board said there are a lot of permanents in play. I think Meteor Golem returned back to. I see it in play again. So something must have happened. You said something about a cauldron.
Yeah. So there was a Pestilent Cauldron, which most of the time you're not going to be casting that half of the card. You're going to be casting Restorative Burst, which is, funnily enough, Karn normally can only get artifacts, but it can get an artifact that happens to have a backside as a sorcery, which is kind of weird. But yeah, we see everything gets picked up. But basically, that card is 5 mana, and it's a double regrowth, essentially. So the fact that Karn can essentially tutor for a double regrowth, where it normally would only be able to get artifacts, kind of messed up.
Yeah, and this is the card that is also just integral to the infinite combo that features Kiora, multiple copies of Kiora, multiple copies of Karn, and also Nykthos to generate lots of mana. It also requires a lot of devotion. Let's see if we have sideboard graphics. If we do, we'll take a look at that really quickly. But I want to take a look at the Bant human size, because I feel like this is a deck that we really haven't touched on, really haven't talked about. And we're going to see, even though Mono Green Devotion did take the first game here, what are our thoughts for sideboarding? Who improves better? What do you see from Matt's side that you'd like to bring in for this matchup?
All right, I'm going to do the little Joe thing and kind of squint on the screen a little bit. So I see.
I love that we're just ripping into Joe. We're gonna have a group meeting, like a post NRG sort of I don't know, what is it called, like a post meeting or whatever. We're definitely bringing this up, 100%, 130%. All right, yeah, continue. Sorry.
So we got a new card here, Anointed Peacekeeper. I don't know if we can pull that up on the screen, but that is a card that I don't think is too bad in this matchup. I just want to pull the exact text up on it, but I believe it's something like you name a card and their spells that card name costs 2 more. Yeah, okay. So I don't hate that card because you can kind of maybe try to strand them with with Storm the Festival in their hand. So I think I like that. And then we also have a couple of copies of Thalia Heretic Athar, which is really important because it makes the blockers come into play tapped. So something like Old Growth Troll and Cavalier can't block the turn they come into play, which can be pretty massive, giving you the turn to be able to attack. So I like those cards. Maybe Portable Hole for Llanowar Elves. Not sure if we have enough stuff to cut though.
Yeah, that's a really good question, too. Let's take a look at the other side, Mono Green Devotion. I mean, this will be a little bit less of an interesting deck because, again, Karn the Great Creator really does take up a lot of the sideboard slots. Is there anything that you see interesting? And by that, I mean, like, what is the one card on the screen that we are probably going to look at board again?
We like to call this No Changes.
Okay. Very good. Just submit. All right, cool. No. If I have to bet, Andrew Ellenbogen, PT champion, probably like took 15 cards, mashed them into this deck, and then just pulled out the exact same 15 cards, just what it is. But that is super interesting. I mean, No Changes is definitely like a tactical decision here because that just means that in this matchup, you don't consider this a matchup worth really devoting time or sideboard space to. And I have to wonder whether that is something that could be costly in terms of just like overall spread. But that just means that in post-board games, one deck has significantly improved, the other no changes, right? So how do we expect the post-board games to go?
Well, actually, chat brings up a good point. There's a Sky Sovereign to the main along with the sideboard. I wonder if there's any chance, now that I actually think about this, I said no changes. I wonder if there's a chance you want to move the Sky Sovereign to the board so you can have a second one to Karn for in case your first one gets Hopeful initiated. That might be a little too deep, but something to think about. I still think that after sideboard, as we talked about with the Humans deck increasing pretty significantly, I like the Humans deck in the post-board games, I think, especially in the play.
All right, well, let's check it out. Let's get into the first post-board game here. Andrew Ellenbogen up a game here, Mono Green Devotion, recurring a couple Meteor Golems. That was pretty sweet, leveraging the power of Nykthos and Karn the Great Creator. But Matt on Bant Humans definitely going to have something to say about that. And I have no idea what land that is. I'm going to look at my cheat sheet. Devin, what is that land?
Secluded Courtyard. That's the new unclaimed territory, but it can also activate rather than just cast spells.
Going to retcon my earlier statement. It's secluded territory.
And we do see the portable holes coming in. I wasn't sure if we had enough stuff to cut. I'm curious as to see what Matt decided to cut for those in this matchup, but there it is. 2 sideboard cards.
Okay. Powerful stuff. Yeah.
So Peacekeeper, this is the card that we were talking about. So basically, you get to look at the hand, you get to name a card, spells of that card and activated abilities of that card cost 2 more to activate. Now, one thing that's really important, if you name Karn the Great Creator, not only does it cost 6 to play, but you have to spend 2 mana to use the loyalty ability. So that card specifically against Karn is pretty massive. Now, he decides to name Troll, which does also make sense because if you don't name the Troll, then there's a pretty clear blocker for the Peacekeeper, but that also signifies to Andrew that there's no Reflector Mage. So, if there was a Reflector Mage, you almost certainly would name Karn there, but.
That's
or we just have another one to name
too.
Karn.
Yeah.
In the second turn from Andrew. Wow.
These draws.
That's crazy.
Oh, all right. This is gonna be so funny if this is just like Elite Spellbinder Beatdown, or I don't know. For me, for some reason, I just think more of like Curse of Silence when I think of Anointed Peacekeeper, and less so, the PV promo card. But not promo card, but you know what I mean. Like, but this is a turn of events, like a plot twist, if you will, right? So, I guess we do see the Old Growth Troll come down here with thanks from Kiora.
I can't tell if the second one named Cavalier, and now that I think about it, I think actually naming Cavalier was right, because what's the worst case scenario? If Andrew plays the Karn, you can just attack the Karn anyways. There's nothing to be able to block. So I believe the second Peacekeeper actually did name Cavalier, which I think does make a little bit of sense.
Okay, yeah, that is a good thing to be aware of. And honestly, which this also means is that, Matt realizing, and this is something that I've also learned over time is, I only play control decks in most of the formats that I play in. And so like, Collected Company going to find double of the pack leaders. But yeah, what I realized is that Karn is especially good against me because I never have board presence. That is the one thing that Karn is actually kind of just not so great against. And so you're right. Naming the Cavalier there, kind of smart.
Right, yeah. If you play Karn on an empty board, especially facing down 2 3/3s, then Matt can pretty easily just clean up the Planeswalkers. So Andrew's kind of path to victory, or his number one thing that he wants to try to set up, is try to get something into play before deploying the Karn, which it looks like was able to establish this turn, but now there's 2 more 3/3s. So if you were say play Karn, maybe down tick for a boat, it's not, it's pretty trivial for Matt to just get the Karn off the battlefield. It doesn't really have to try that hard. So
All right, Growth Troll number 2 going to come into play now. That does cost 5 mana. Kiora going to draw a card for playing the troll here, and a Elvish Mystic is now in play as well. Sorry, Land of War Elves.
Yep. And that's just another chump blocker for the Peacekeepers. The pack leaders can potentially get trample. I'm just going to fire off another Coco. Really looking for Reflector Mage, which he did find. Ooh. There's a Reflector Mage and a Lieutenant, which I think are probably going to be the grab. Yep. So we can go Reflector Mage, bounce one of the trolls. Lieutenant counter. I wonder if you just say, just go upstairs. Like the troll's gonna, the troll would be able to trade with the Peacekeeper that's naming Cav, but I don't even know that that's that bad for you, because even if you trade for that Peacekeeper, then assuming the Llanowar Elf doesn't block, you're still taking what, 12 damage, putting Andrew to 8. I think I actually kind of like that.
Yeah, I honestly am also kind of a fan of just going face here, because you have so many potent threats next turn anyways that'll just like keep asking the question. And speaking of asking the question, it's like, how is Andrew even supposed to get out of the situation?
Yeah, and we get Matt got to draw 2 cards off the pack leader because there was 2 triggers, and a portable hole for the Llanowar Elf. So that was quite a turn.
Right, very, very insane. Okay, looks like Kiora is going to be taken off the table here. So Matt might have a different plan in mind. Now, keep in mind that the anointed Peacekeeper is still naming Troll. So the one that was bounced to the hand might be harder to cast, but it looks like we're going to go for the Cavalier instead. And now, is the board yet stabilized? Probably not, right?
Well, with Andrew at 12, I believe this is just lethal. Right, you just send everything at face, block a 4, take. Yeah, this is just lethal on board. So,
okay, making the best play.
Now it's extra lethal. Big fan of extra lethal.
So, game 2 going to go to the hands of Bant Humans. Matt taking it down with, honestly, back-to-back Collected Company was really powerful, finding a lot of key just interactive elements. And I will say, though, on the other hand, that like if it was maybe play draw dependent, like if it was the other way around, if Andrew was on the play, maybe those old growth trolls would have come into play first. Anointed Peacekeeper looked really good for multiple reasons too, right? I think that card looked pretty impressive.
Yeah, that card looked phenomenal that game, especially on the play where, because Matt had a second one, he even got to kind of sculpt out the game where you named the troll in the first one and then the Cav in the second one. And basically, those Peacekeepers were probably worth about 2 or 3 time walks respectively. And it's just, once you have that much time, it's pretty easy to set up a board where, as you saw, just Coco into Coco, and from there it's pretty trivial.
Yeah, for sure. Any changes? Let's talk about sideboarding real quick. If you want to visit Matt Human's sideboard one more time, any changes that you would like to or consider making, just given you kind of expect this match to, like you mentioned, likely no changes from the mono green side going into this last game. So are there any adjustments? Because the only thing that's really changing then would be the play draw situation, right? So walk me through what your thoughts are.
So we saw portable holes in Matt's deck for game 2. If all 4 portable holes were not in, it is a card I think I think it's like 100% necessary to have all 4 on the draw. That's, on the draw, you're more likely to be able, just being able to kill an elf or a wolf will Haven on the draw is much more important. So if maybe for some reason Matt only brought a couple copies in, you definitely want full 4 on the draw. Cards like Adeline and Extraction Specialist, I think, get a little bit worse. Adeline specifically doesn't line up that well against Troll and Cavalier. So you're looking for your creatures that have more interaction, like your Thalias and your Peacekeepers and stuff like that. So pretty much the same stuff, just 4 portable holes definitely on the draw.
Okay, all right. Let's see if we can get into the final game of this match. Andrew Ellenbogen playing Mono Green Devotion 1, game 1, but Matt Johnson on Bant Humans coming back with a vicious game 2 victory. And looks like Matt's going to be on a mulligan to at least 6 here. Yep. You get, okay, wait, plot twist. That was not a dork. I thought it would be like turn 1 mana dork, but instead it's Oath of Nissa.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like usually you kind of pump the fist when they have turn 1 Oath of Nissa, but not if your hand is portable hole in it. You're like, come on, why couldn't you just have the elf this game when I have the portable hole?
Something. Check this script. Did you not get the memo?
And now it's really awkward because I believe Matt's hand has a 2-drop and a portable hole. But now it's because Andrew is forcing Matt to play off curve. Do you play the hole or do you play the 2-drop? I think it's a Thalia. Or no, that's a pack leader. This is really tough. It's like you have to think about. So if you don't portable hole the Haven, worst case, Andrew has like 4 mana to play Karn. But if you have a 3/3 in play, you don't care about the Karn as much. Whereas like this line, you're still, if Andrew has a forest, you're still allowing him to play Old Growth Troll, which is kind of awkward. So not sure. It's kind of close.
Yeah, and I also so it looks like going to the next turn here, we have another Oath of Nissa that is being played, and there's also Nykthos as well. Finding a Llanowar Elves off the Oath of Nissa, deploying it, developing mana. Okay, so this is a little bit terrifying because the next turn might mean fireworks, and so I think Matt's gonna have to prepare for that with just on his side. So portable hole got to take care of the freshly played Llanowar Elves. So I think things might be slowly lining up. An interesting choice. Do we have another 2-drop that we could have played? Maybe not. Never mind. Straightforward choice.
Very minor, but I think I would have killed the Haven there because you could eventually Reflector Mage the Llanowar Elves. I don't know how much, I don't know how interested you're ever going to be in Reflector Mage a Llanowar Elf, but I guess maybe prioritizing the fact that maybe giving Andrew one less chump blocker, but it's pretty close there.
Teferi, who slows the sunset. Now, when the infinite combo with this was explained to me for the first time, I kind of just like dropped my jaw and I was like, who even thought about this? Unfortunately, Teferi who slows the sunset is it's blue-white in this mono green deck. So I am going to be interested to see. I guess you have Oath of Nissa in play, right? So like all your colors will tap to fix your mana.
I'm not gonna lie, Anu, I have no idea what that promo is. Any idea?
Oh,
I literally don't know.
I got this. And my answer is I have no idea either. Yeah, it's really good. Is it Charming? No.
I don't think it's Charming Prince. It might maybe it's Thalia? Is it Thalia? Okay, chat's saying it's Thalia. I've never seen that version of Thalia. Okay.
Yeah, it's the vampire Thalia.
I've never seen that one.
I need to figure out. Yeah, Mina Harker. Yeah. I think that's
okay. Yeah. Because I was looking at the text box and I was like, that's not a long enough text box for it to be Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. But yeah, no, you're right. Chat's saying it's Pikachu. It definitely could be Pikachu.
I'm Pikachu, chat. Come on. Yes, just finishing the cycle. That is actually me. No, just kidding. All right, it looks like Storm the Festival is going to be here in play. Top 5 cards. What do you have? There's a Karn the Great Creator. I think I saw an Old Growth Troll as well.
Yeah, I know we spent a lot of time talking about Pikachus and whatnot, but this game has gone pretty well for Matt. There was a Cavalier played, and I believe a Reflector Mage, plus a huge attack to take out that. Matt has done a very, very good job at mixing pressure plus being able to put pressure plus stunting Andrew's growth with all the portable holes and whatnot. So very, very, very well played by Matt here. And with Andrew at 10, I think, trying to see if there's a Coco.
Ooh, that's a good draw.
Not the best Coco.
Oh, it was a good draw.
Oh, no.
Man. Classic collected company. In your time of dire need, when you need it the most, what do you get? A pair of 1/1s. Perfect.
As they say, you live by the Coco and you die by the Coco.
True. I wonder if we're just gonna rename this deck to like Bat Scam or something. That would be the funniest thing in the world. No, but this is a really good collected company for Andrew Ellenbogen, because now I think we're coming closer to stabilizing. Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns in play means that the attacks, the pressure just gets stopped. So rewinding back, I mean, this is like how even is Matt going to get the last 10 points of damage into play? Because oh man, there's still a Storm the Festival in the graveyard. Teferi now in play, and the game is starting to definitely slip away if it's not already just completely been pulled out from under the rug.
Yeah, and Andrew's got more than enough mana to flashback the Storm. I believe that if Andrew hits, depending on how much mana is floating, because the Thalia does mess this up a little bit, I think Karn is just lethal. Oh, he just has the Karn in his hand. Okay, well that works too.
Okay, I was also going to say like
Which
earlier,
doesn't have enough mana.
True.
Oh, he's got lands untapped. Okay, so this should be enough. Yeah, this should be infinite. So yeah, the way that it works with, for those of you who don't know, is Chain Veil activates Teferi, untaps the Chain Veil and the Nykthos to then make more mana to then activate the Chain Veil again, which then Teferi untaps the Chain Veil and the Nykthos. You rinse, repeat this ad nauseum. You gain 2 life for each iteration of Teferi, so you gain infinite life, make infinite mana, and you have infinite Karn activation, so you can basically plus Karn 100 times, minus it for every card in your sideboard. But you really just get the Pestilent Cauldron and then mill your opponent out, and that's lethal.
I swear this deck. Have you ever played Resident Evil 4?
Yes.
Okay, you're like the merchant, right? There's a character in the game who's the merchant who you can like buy and sell wares from, and he's just like, "What are you buying? What are you selling?" Those like iconic lines, right? And for this deck, I just feel like this mono green devotion deck is kind of like that, but it's just like you want infinite combos. I got all of them, like with Teferi or with Kiora or like like the Cauldron, Restorative Burst rather. Either way, Andrew Ellenbogen going to take this match down in 3, so advancing to 2-0-1 now, so still very live for top 8 contention here. And Andrew Ellenbogen is actually locked for the event, so probably doesn't even need to win here, since at the end of the year Andrew Ellenbogen will be playing in the showdown. Speaking of which, why don't we take a look at that graphic just to understand where we are with just like the full year's length of activities and how these events actually, like, why do they matter, right? So you can see here already we have today's with the updates and points and whatnot. Jesse Robkin, the newest addition to this roster, confirmed of winning the season 2 at large. One of the season 2 at-large slots. There's still one more that is in contention here. We saw that earlier in the slides here, but congratulations to all of these players who are playing in the 2022 championship. You have Ivan Espinoza from last year, and then all the victors from all the showdowns and the at-large bids from season 1. So it's going to be a great event, and I am looking forward to it. It is a 16-person, 20K event. It's going to be great for sure. In other news, though, it looks like we are 2 minutes over time in the round here, so we may take a look at some. Actually, honestly, I think we're gonna cut to break real quick. Let's cut to break. We'll come back afterwards, and we'll have some updates for you with the rounds and things like that, where we're going. And then, obviously, I still need to talk about season 3, because season 3 of NRG series might just be the best one yet. All right, see you back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.